Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, we're going to interview one of our former UX Philippines volunteers, Niao De Leon. Niao, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
I'm Niao. I'm an independent UX consultant, currently working in the intersections between language, interaction, and strategy.
Oh, I remember you were one of our hosts and planning volunteers before. Can you tell us about
Yeah.
when you were still volunteering for UX Philippines and what were your responsibilities back then?
Yeah, so I remember aside from the hosting you mentioned, I was helping plan and execute some of the conferences and smaller meetups and also doing my duties as a speaker, sharing knowledge and some of my theories on UX.
For those who don't, Niao has her own book on Microcopy.
Oh
That's
yeah. So
Microcopy.
I can actually trace it all back to UXPH because I remember pitching the idea of doing a small talk about microcopy to you. I think that was in the Google Philippines office.
Mhm.
And at that time, there wasn't really much emphasis on the verbal aspect of design. All the talk was about design systems. Brad Frost's work was pretty new at that time. But I felt that the language, or linguistic, or the verbal side of design was being neglected. I wanted to put a spotlight, highlight that aspect of design, which is why I pitched that idea. And then after that talk, I was inspired to put all of the ideas I did from the series of talks into that book, which became the microcopy book that I published. But I think I can really trace it all back to that series of talks, and I was really just giving talks and exploring the ideas around the verbal aspect of design, microcopy, and the verbal design talk that I gave. I just left my work of 10 plus years and I was trying to
Wow.
establish myself as an independent consultant. So at that time, I was doing a lot of marketing work and I wanted to separate myself from that and really focus on the UX part of my career. Yeah, that book really established myself as kind of authority, even though at that time I didn't really have that much experience, practical experience, but I got to test some of those theories that I put into the published work. So
What would you say were the valuable skills and lessons you learned during your time as a volunteer and then working on your book? What are the skills
oh
that
yeah,
and
yeah.
lessons that you learned since then?
I'd say in terms of like hard skills, it probably would be the experience delivering talks and getting feedback from the community on what topics they're interested in and what topics might be valuable or useful. And then maybe also some practice doing the talks, and I really got to hone my skills with the speaking. And what was your question?
Yeah, it's the
Aside
skills
from
that you learned
skills,
and then you learned, yeah.
lessons, yeah. So lessons, maybe it's more of being able to interact with the community and forming networks. So that
Yeah.
was the most valuable thing about the UXPH community. And also just getting different perspectives on UX, on the different skills and the different experiences. And I got to form a lot of different connections and friends that I still
Yeah.
talk to today and get to share some experiences with within the industry.
So what would you say were some of your challenges and triumphs? So maybe first your challenges that you encountered, then later maybe the triumphs after all those challenges.
The typical challenges of establishing yourself as a professional, or especially as an
Yeah.
independent UX professional. It's very challenging to establish a niche and then doing all of this work, marketing yourself, trying to develop a specialization, getting clients, all of the different challenges of establishing a pretty small or boutique or independent consulting practice. Marketing yourself, deciding what to do,
Yeah.
trying to keep yourself relevant, getting projects, and sometimes managing just the workload of the different projects once you've established yourself. So, the of course being able to do those talks and having a platform with UXPH was very helpful in getting a lot of projects. So that wasn't really the difficult part. That maybe it was more challenging trying to decide what to take on and how to take yourself further from the initial niche that you get known for and deciding where to focus on, because since then the UX field has really expanded and there's a lot
Yeah.
of areas that you can focus on. Yeah.
So how did you overcome, and how did you would you say succeed in those challenges?
I'd say it's more of a matter of finding what you love and being able to keep remembering what got you doing that thing in the first place.
Yeah.
And that kind of serves as a guide as what you should be doing. So some of the pillars, I've deciding your values and deciding your pillars. Some of those pillars I mentioned earlier: language, interaction, and strategy. So I didn't really keep myself to a very specific area because there's a lot of things I'm interested in. But as
Yeah.
long as those I can satisfy those pillars, then I'd have some kind of guide on what projects to take on. So right now I'm doing work with information architecture, doing card
Yeah.
sorting. Actually, just before this, I was analyzing some card sorting similarity matrices for a jewelry brand in the UK. But at the same time, I have another project doing verbal identity, so branding. So very
Mhm.
far from the very analytical work of card sorting and information architecture. It's the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum of doing very emotional emotive work, doing branding. But since I have defined those pillars of language, interaction, strategy, then I know what kind of projects to take on that would keep me motivated and fulfilled with my work.
Yeah. It looks like you really established a certain niche that you wanted to focus on, and it really has guided you along your choices.
These days you really do need to specialize, because if you don't, then you become commoditized and
Yeah.
you don't have pricing power. So it's very
Yes.
hard to make a living if you don't have a specialization. So yeah, so that's one thing I learned that was very important, that I never forgot from those early days. I think it was an accident. I lucked into a certain niche just because I felt there was a certain need that needed to be a certain area in UX that I needed to focus on or highlight or put a spotlight on. So I lucked out in that regard. But that was one of the main lessons I learned since then,
Yeah.
that it's important to establish a
Yes.
specialization and associate your name with that specialization, so that when you get clients, it's very easy to, you don't have to force yourself. So nowadays, I get clients that approach me rather than me trying to apply for jobs or projects. Yeah, it's a lot easier to get projects just by making myself, just sharing my knowledge about around the areas that I'm interested in and getting my practice associated with the concepts that I'm interested in and
That's
just putting
nice.
myself
No,
out there so that,
what are you
yeah, yeah.
being known for? And that's it's good to
Yeah.
tell
So
our people.
it started with that series of talks and then it evolved into the book. And then nowadays, if I just needed to do a bit of promotion, I just post some articles, post some thought leadership. I guess that's one of the key concepts is thought leadership. So if you don't have thought leadership, you don't have work.
Perfect. Sige, so let's talk more about that. So what would you now give?
Oh
Because
yeah.
there are a lot of newbies right now lately coming into the UX
Yeah.
space and career shifters. What's your
Oh yeah,
advice
yeah.
now
So
for newbies and career shifters?
I did a career shift myself at that time. I was a marketing manager, although I was doing some UX work, but that wasn't my main role. So I did shift from mostly marketing to UX. And some of the skills were transferable, so that helped. So you have to identify what kind of skills you'd be able to take into the UX work and capitalize on those strengths. So in my case, I was doing marketing, so that was doing a lot of communication, branding.
Yeah.
So a lot of those skills you can take into UX. So you can make sure you hone those skills. And one particular skill that was very useful for the niche that I chose was copywriting, because
Yeah.
copywriting is a big skill in marketing. So in UX writing, there's a lot of overlap. So you do need to identify those skills. But one of the so you do need to establish yourself. So doing thought leadership. So whatever topic that interests you in UX, you have to do something to put yourself out there. Either make a video, make a now back then it was writing blogs, but nowadays maybe it would be creating TikToks or yeah, creating videos or whatever medium you're comfortable with to just share your knowledge, share your lessons, share your learnings, your insights. It doesn't matter whether you're an expert. At first, you'd feel like, oh, I'm not an expert. Why am I sharing my knowledge?
Hmm.
So I remember during the talks, I was very nervous because I was speaking alongside big names in the
Yeah.
industry. You have people coming in from in some of the talks I did. I was speaking alongside the UX leaders of Airbnb, and then who am I to be giving these talks? But then whenever I feel that kind of inadequacy, I just think to myself, well, what's the heart of the work? Why am I doing this? Why am I motivated? Why am I interested in this topic? So it's just a matter of focusing on what drives you to what's fascinating about that particular facet of UX that
Nice.
interests you. So whether it's
Nice.
the language side of it, the information architecture, just focus on that and then just share that with the world, share that with the community. And then surprisingly you'd find yourself getting recognition, being associated with the topics that interest you until at some point you're recognized as a kind of authority within that subject,
Nice.
even though you don't feel it yourself. So that's something I'd advise, especially if you're trying to take the path of the more difficult path of establishing yourself as an independent. There's nothing wrong really with taking a job. It's somewhere I did start with a 12-year career with various roles in the IT industry. But if you're trying to, even though, even if you have a job, you still need to get yourself out there and be recognized by doing thought leadership, establishing yourself as someone who shares very passionately information or knowledge about a certain subject so that whenever your next job comes around, it becomes easier to get hired because your name is
Yep.
out
Yep.
there when people search for you. Oh, she's done some work around, I don't know, yes, and she has done some work around prototyping or UX writing. Yeah. So that's one of the main things
Nice.
I'd
Nice.
advise to newer people in the
Okay.
practice.
So now, quickly lang. So can you just give us one quick outlook? What do you think is the outlook for UX practitioners in the future? One quick
Oh
thing that
yeah,
you think are
yeah. So I've not really spent too much time thinking about the future, to be
yeah.
honest. But when some of during the height of the buzz around I did write a few articles and did some thinking about the future of the industry. So one of the things I see happening in the UX industry is that there's going to be a lot less opportunity doing the grunt work, so to speak.
Yeah.
So so when I say grunt work, it's more of the designing the actual buttons, the actual
Hmm.
screens,
Hmm.
the bulk of the prototyping work or the first draft of
Hmm.
the copy, the first draft of the UX writing work. So there's going to be a lot less of that and more of the thinking, more of the
Yeah.
analysis, more of the
Yeah.
strategy. So you have to ensure that your foundation is strong. So you understand the main principles of UX, cognitive load, Fitts law, all of the different principles
Fundamentals.
when
The
it
laws
comes
of
to, for
UX.
example, in yeah, the mentals, the information architecture, it should be continuous, no dead ends, stuff like that. Because all of it, there's going to be so many tools generating the actual designs. But whether you can support or justify whether the design generated by the AI is good or bad, that's going to be driven by your knowledge of the different concepts and principles of UX. Yeah,
Nice.
you have to make sure that your foundations are strong. Read up
Nice.
on the about face, the Bible of UX interaction, read up on strategic writing for UX. Not even my book because it's a bit old. So there's a lot of newer books on the subject of UX writing. Just make sure
So,
you have your foundations or your basics covered.
what is your last parting thoughts for our newbies and career shifters?
Mhm. I didn't really expect to build a career out of UX. It was just something that I found interesting. So just focus on, just follow your curiosity, follow what interests you, make sure that you fill yourself up. So sometimes when you're not motivated, it's most likely because you're not taking in new knowledge, so you don't have any input. So make sure you read up on some new books, some new articles, watch some videos, watch Ellie's interviews, just to get some new perspectives that would fill you up and excite you and get you interested about the work that you're doing. Because,
Nice.
yeah, sometimes that's all that it takes. Don't forget that you're doing UX because you want to make lives better, make people's experiences better, and try to get back on your frustrations. One of the main things that drive me is are the frustrations that I personally encounter when I use
Yeah.
applications and think to myself, what why was it designed this way, or why is it this way? And it inspires me to get back to, okay, so how can I apply and turn those frustrations into actionable insights that will translate into better user experiences for as many people as possible.
Okay. So thanks, Nia.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Till next
All right.
time. Thank you.